Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Stoic Viking. I'm Joe. So tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are in this world, we've got a number of different things we're going to talk about. Obviously, we're going to do a big weekend wrap up of the World Cup and some of the other juicier news in the world, and then we'll get right into. I think what most people want to be here for is we're going to be talking about Africa in Europe Special Forces units, because we've been covering mostly the United States and Europe. There's obviously Africa and Asia by comparison. A lot of the special operations are a little behind just because most of it is more European and America focused. They are the ones that started it. They're kind of are the pioneers of that type of capability, and Asia has been doing its best, and you'd actually be surprised of how awesome some of I think specifically some Asian nations are in catching up with the capabilities of their special operations or their special forces. So I appreciate everybody. And so the first thing is, obviously, you can see we're starting to do themed bandanas, and I wanted to wear this bandana for Norway in respect for Norway and their awesome run in the World Cup, and Erling Haaland and just becoming the fan favorite of the world. I think the World Cup brought a lot of amazing things, and not only did we get to see Scotland and the Tartan Army make an appearance and show their awesome, amazing culture and drink almost every city they went to dry. I know the bartenders and all the bars were happy that Scotland was in the World Cup, but we got to see Norway and the amazing character and culture, not only of just their country and their fans, but also their team and how they handled things, how they conducted themselves on and off the field. And I think everybody fell in love with the Norwegian national team, as well as our boy Erling Haaland. So what's up, TCY, BUB? Major upset on Argentina. Were you rooting for Argentina? All right. Let's just make sure I did something correct. All right. I think we're good. Anyways, so getting into it. So we'll start with the FIFA World Cup. So basically, if anybody saw, I'm sure everybody did, that Spain beat Argentina. And I think there's a lot of things that we can get out of this thing. So remind you, so I grew up in Germany. I spent playing soccer. I grew up in the German soccer system before I moved to the United States as a teenager. So I grew up in European style soccer, right? And growing up in Germany, you actually are sort of almost taught to not only learn the German and the overall European system, which is more team play, more passing the ball, more control, less individual flair, these crazy, amazing, super sexy plays. You also kind of grow up, especially in the 90s and in Germany, to hate the South American systems, specifically the Brazilian system, right? You are to look down, not necessarily hate, but to look down upon. So I think seeing the different types of style of soccer, I think you kind of saw the pinnacle. One, you had Argentina, who was the champions of the Copa America, which is the tournament for South America, which occasionally invites North American teams, versus the champion of the Euros. The two best teams of their continents facing off in the finals. Both speak Spanish, and I think, in my personal opinion, and I've watched Spain play throughout the entire World Cup. They were by far overall the best team. And there's a reason why in the World Cup, only one goal has ever been scored on Spain, because not only do they have great attackers, they have an amazing midfield. Everybody on their team defends. And when the defense gets the ball, they do not sit on it. It is moved quickly. There is a level of urgency in the back that, like, one of the things I was really disappointed about Germany was how, when the German central backs in the defense had the ball, they just moved the ball so fucking slowly, and it fucking pissed me off. And as somebody who is a defensive person most of his life, I was a defensive midfielder and then probably a defender when I got into college, or I was a back. moving the ball with an urgency as a defender is one of your things. And so it's yeah, it is what it is. So I think the better team won, Spain versus Argentina. And yeah, I also think, and might be a little bit of a hot take, I do not like the way that, the telenovela style, yes, selling and kind of doing a bit of a dive or over exaggerating times you get fouled is a part of the game, right? But I think South American teams take it to the whole new level. We saw this with Paraguay, we saw this with Mexico, and we saw this with Argentina. And anytime that you saw just two European teams play, like when you saw Spain versus Belgium, or when you saw Spain versus France, it was like when they fouled each other, they kind of knew, like they're like, yeah, I fouled you. Okay, cool. But it was about playing football or playing soccer. Anytime a South American team is on there, and this includes Mexico, it's like, yeah, like they're just selling it. They're being cheap. And the fact that Argentina tried to fight the Spanish team after the final whistle was blown and Spain had won the World Cup, I thought was kind of really just add insult to injury to the fact that Argentina met a better team and they played the better football. And luckily the better football team won. And I think that's, it is what it is. So would any Eastern European countries allow Americans to join their SF or counter-terror units? It all depends on what their rules. Like, for example, in the United States, in order to join typically a special operations unit, you're going to have at least a secret level clearance or a top secret security clearance. And there are certain restrictions to that based off of, are you an American citizen and other things like that. So I'm assuming other countries have similar things. So it depends on what is your status within that country. You probably have to be a citizen of that country to have some sort of level of security clearance. And all special operations units have some level of security clearance. So that would probably be the main restriction going into that. All right. Let's go into, all right, we're going to talk about one thing besides the Trump thing. And we're going to move on to, we're going to talk about Trump real quick. We're mainly going to talk about his speech about election fraud, right? So, also, what did you guys think of the halftime show? Very American, if I don't say. You had to throw a bit of Americanness. Like, you definitely had an NFL style, not only like pregame, but also the halftime show. And I think a lot of people around the world were not exactly used to that style. What's up, Johan? How you doing, brother? So I don't know. What do you guys thought of the halftime show? I thought it was entertaining at the least. I definitely thought Ronaldo. He had Ronaldo Gino and Ronaldo. Ronaldo got fat as fuck, brother. Like, talk about two people who let themselves go, specifically Ronaldo, bro. That dude, I'd already seen weeks prior of what he looked like and how much he'd like fallen off and not exercised. But yeah, dude, Ronaldo got fat as fuck, bro. So we're shifting gears. All right. So one of the biggest political stories this past week was about President Trump's speech on election integrity. So once again, before we dive in, I want to make something very clear. This isn't about telling you what to think. It's about understanding what was said. And this is going to come from both sides. We're going to cover the supporters, basically both the left and the right in the view on this, right? I'm kind of like your headband wearing version of ground news. At least I try to be. Why critics disagree in separating evidence from opinion, as is always on this channel, I encourage everybody to challenge ideas and not attack each other. So President Trump focused on one central argument in this speech. He said that Americans must have confidence that elections are secure, transparent, and free from manipulation. Sounds pretty good, right? He argued that election security should become one of the country's highest priorities. Among the issues that were discussed, he talked about voter identification, he talked about citizenship verification, foreign influence campaigns, election system vulnerabilities, and mail-in ballot procedures. He talked about restoring public confidence in election, and whether you agree or disagree with him, the central message was that we should trust in our elections. That elections, whether you're left or right, should not be manipulated. Right? If people vote for somebody, okay, cool. If it's not the person you voted for, all right, let the other people, the other side, have their chance of their candidates, see how well they do, and if it doesn't, it is what it is, right? So I guess the question is for you guys is how important is public confidence in elections? Should confidence itself be considered a national security issue? Right. So arguments for on the support side of this make that democracy only works if citizens believe elections are honest. Their position is simple. If people lose confidence in elections, democracy itself becomes weaker. So should elections security receive the same attention as border securities or cybersecurity? Like, should it seen as just as high of a priority as far as the emphasis and funding and direction and the amount of effort of securing elections should be put into securing our borders? And the supporters often advocate that if you support it, you're probably saying that, hey, I want photo ID, I want citizenship verification, we want cleaner voter rolls, I want a much more secure absentee ballot process and procedures, and that the supporters will also argue that these measures reduce opportunities for fraud and increase the public confidence within the actual elections. Most developed democracies require some form of voter identification, but the United States have a uniform national standard. So and then obviously talking about foreign interference is real. Obviously, there's been a number of countries who have been involved. It's been reported, it's been alleged, but the supporters of this obviously point out that most of the foreign governments, including Russia, China, and Iran, have all been identified by U.S. intelligence agencies as attempting to influence American public opinion through cyber operations, their social media campaigns, and other influence efforts. Whether or not how much that's actually been affected, that is kind of what is really more of what is up for debate. But these countries have definitely tried to influence elections because, why not? If a certain president gets elected who would help in their particular situation, why would you not try to influence? We try to influence shit all the time. So transparency basically builds trust. The more that we believe that there's no issues, the more people will, well, in theory, not give too big of a fuss about elections. But that's not, let's be honest, people, no matter how much transparency there is, people are still going to bitch. That just is what it is. So what are the arguments against it? So critics make the argument that no new evidence of widespread election fraud exists. Critics argue that while election security is important, no new evidence has been presented with the speech that demonstrated some widespread fraud change since the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Should future reforms be based primarily on identified vulnerabilities? I think that the argument that most of the left says, right, and I'm just going to get into this really just kind of cuts down to, should you have the same level of documents required for you to go get your driver's license as you do to vote? And I personally, it just seems obvious to me that, hey, if you need some documents, if you need documents to take a driver's license or you need documents to get a house, you probably should need the same level of documents to vote. And, this concept that people who are in poverty, who are on food stamps, everything like that, who are welfare, don't have identification. Oh, they do. That's been debunked, because in order for those people to get their welfare, they have to have identification. I know this because I I had real estate, and I actually rented to people who had Section 8 voucher holders, and they needed documents, the same documents that are required for elections. So, what is your opinion of Trump's speaking oration skills? Do you think there would be less divisiveness if we had eloquence, inspiration skills? Look, I think that definitely there are certain things, the way he speaks probably does not help his cause, that he definitely could be a better orator, like someone who's like JD Vance or Marco Rubio, who definitely speak more eloquently, more just in a way that just doesn't immediately turn people off. Absolutely. But the thing that I personally appreciate about him is that, and I think what a lot of people have, is that I think we've just spent a lifetime of just the whole just talking around bullshit is what politics do. Whether it's both Democrats and Republicans have been doing it for ages, right? For to have somebody who just doesn't talk like that is kind of refreshing, right? Obviously, there's some ups and there's some downs with it, but you know, you can't. Nothing's going to be perfect, right? So I see some of the things that he does that I like. I see some of the things that he does that I don't like. And I definitely think that if he spoke more eloquently, he probably would promote some level of more divisiveness. But it is what it is. So, anyway, so that's kind of like my real thing is I'm just like, hey, if we require the argument is that these people don't have this level of documentation or it's not needed. But we need it for everything else. We need to go get our driver's license. We need to be a part of even social welfare programs. Everybody has some form of ID. Like this concept that people in poverty don't is bullshit. Trust me. So that's the thing. I was just like, why not secure it? And everybody, if you have secured elections, it should work out for both sides. I don't understand why it wouldn't. So anyways, all right, let's get on to the good stuff. All right. Actually, before we do that, let's play this. I'm sorry. Let's play this one video. All right. So this is about the Trump speech. We'll just play this.
In his primetime address to the nation, President Trump castigating America's election system, saying it's rife with what he called shocking vulnerabilities, with the White House posting hundreds of pages of declassified but highly redacted documents.
These disclosures reveal an election system so broken and so vulnerable that no one can possibly defend it.
The president accusing China of illicitly acquiring 220 million American voter files beginning in 2020, though much of that information is available publicly.
They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win.
China's foreign ministry calling those claims, quote, entirely fabricated and a malicious smear. The president also pointing to a review of state voter rolls and public records by the Department of Homeland Security.
They identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections.
But election experts say the database that may have been used for that analysis often flags newly naturalized citizens as non-citizen voters. The DHS secretary today warning state election officials to accept new federal involvement in their election security processes, or else
those individuals can also be held accountable by fines, by penalties, and even, depending on how far it goes, prison time.
Democrats today blasting the president's speech.
What we also saw last night was a clear signal of this president's intent to unconstitutionally wield federal power, to attack this election, and to undermine voting rights.
Garrett joins us now live from the White House. Garrett, the president.
So I always question anytime that the opposition to any sort of argument just uses buzzwords and doesn't actually break down the specific argument of why they don't think it is. So that's something I always would know, whether it's coming from left or right. If someone just answers you with just some fucking buzzwords,
is pointing the finger at China, but he's also welcoming its leader to the White House for a visit in the fall.
That's right, Tom. The White House today confirmed that the president still plans to host Chinese leader Xi Jinping for a state visit this fall. And this evening, the president even joked about hosting a joint World Cup tournament with China in the future.
and I don't, once again, I don't know why that surprises anybody, just because Trump is the master shit talker, and he will talk shit about whatever presidential leader and then still host him, or talk shit to his face, right? That's one of the things that some people don't like about him, is he is hard to predict, right? And doesn't necessarily hold grudges, but if you piss him off, it is what it is, right? So, and I know that some people might think that's unstable, and it definitely has the ability to make things politically unstable. But there's also a level of deterrence when a presidential leader, especially the presidential leader of the most powerful military nation and economic power on the planet, is unpredictable, right? So it is what it is. So that is something to take into account. All right, so let's move on to the good stuff. All right, we are going to start talking about the rest of our tier list, and we're going to go into some other units, specifically in the continents of Africa and East Asia, right? We can say Asia, but we'll cover some of the more Middle Eastern stuff later on. So, all right. So we're going to go into, let's see, which one should we go into first? Hey, what's up, Italian Marco? Good to see you, brother. All right. So we're going to cover, let's see what I had my notes. First is, oh, you know what? Give me 1 second. So do you guys want to go Asia or Africa first? We're going to alternate. So did you see Trump clips in the FIFA award ceremony? Yeah, I saw the part where he was like, he was going off to the side and was like, where do I stand? What do I do? What do I do with my hands? So I don't think really anybody told him what he was supposed to do directly afterwards. And does he stand? I don't know what I don't know what he's supposed to do for that ceremony. Is he supposed to stare off to the side? I don't think that he was, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's definitely funny. That's the thing, is you may dislike Trump for whatever reason, but the meme community loves this man. Absolutely loves it. Just endless content. That's the best part. All right. So we are going to go. All right. So we are going to start with all right. All right, sorry about this. I think my notes got a little bit more jumbled up. Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. All right. So we are going to start with Okay. Sorry, guys. I somehow screwed. All right. So let's start with Asia. All right. Let's go start with one of our best. We're going to start with South Korea. And we're going to cover the South Korean SFG. Or I'm sorry, that's the Japanese. The South Korean 707th SMG was Spanish for the Special Missions Group. So one of the things that I want to point out real quick as we get into this is that as I was doing research into this, I will tell you that the South Korean has one of the best recruiting videos I think that I have seen. Does anybody else feel like my camera is out of focus for some reason? Okay, there it is. I don't know why that was such an issue. Here we go. So first of all, we're gonna, if anybody guys knows who the dude Ronan is, here's him on the Sean Ryan. He ends up talking about the South Korean 707th. Yes, Morocco does have SOF.
You were talking about different countries and different units that you've worked with have more discipline. Is there any nation in particular that you've stood a force up that stands out, having more drive, more discipline, better performance than anyone else?
The Korean 707's pretty badass.
Really?
Yeah, they were pretty cool. Their effectiveness, their speed, they were repel masters. They could repel into windows. They run down walls. They're truly like the martial arts commandos. They run around jungle tiger stripe fatigues in snow, barefooted, no shirt on, tiger stripe camouflage on their face. How bad is that? I really enjoy working with those guys. I thought they were really cool. Obviously, the British 2 SAS, they're amazing. I mean, we work with so many commando forces, you know?
Yeah. You were talking about different countries and different.
I like that. The martial art tier 1 unit. I think that's what he said. So we're going to go into a little bit of history, right? So we're going to cover the 707th. So 707th Special Missions Group. Actually, let's watch one of their the 707th. So like I said, the South Koreans seem to have like the best recruiting videos, or just people making videos about the South Korean Special Forces, or the Special Missions Group, which is their essentially their tier 1.
Eyes wide shut, but 그들은 알아. Very like 그들의 영혼 속 거짓말로. They strike like blind straw 하지만 다음 종은 누굴 위해 울릴까? 난 이미 너무 많은 애를 손 안에서 살아.
I'm into it.
Many years 내 소유를 쌓아왔어. 그리고 많은 바보들이 내 것을 뺏으려 해. But these roots go deep, 넌 도를 피흘릴 수 없어. So if you wanna push 난 shove 할 거야. If you wanna spark love 없이도 가능해. 그리고 달려올 것만 제대로 해. Cause 난 두려워하지 않아. Four bro stars 없이 난 폭탄에도 pound 부족해. I'm one shade short of a alarm. 난 이미 retin아서 검하지만 웃음 두 개 내 손바닥에 있어. 나 hurricane의 스윙도 서쪽. Four-wheel drive, ballin' chain 달고 내 vibe 7 중요하지 않아. 나 속스 중요하지 않고 내 웃음스 주문 중요한 난 요소 6 development 위협하면 현명한 사람은 너 실수.
So I don't know if anybody knows this. Like, so I think something that Ronan put out in that video is that they're like the martial artists of like the tier 1 organization. One of the most common misconceptions that people think about special operations in the United States, even at the tier 1 level, is that we're experts in hand-to-hand combat. We are not. I can tell you that even especially at the tier 2 level, it is barely taught. Hand-to-hand combat is barely taught. And it's all individual. If you want to go and learn how to do jiu-jitsu and MMA outside of your like basic, like you have to be level 1 combatives trained, that's it, right? And that's not really hand-to-hand training. Even at the tier 1 level, they definitely give you more facilities, and so you can train it more often, but it is not held to the same standard that hand-to-hand combat is in Japan and Korea. So this is definitely a big difference between our special operations and theirs, is they definitely have a big focus on their martial arts and their hand-to-hand combat, probably more than we do.
그래서 배워 그리 형제의 블런더로 자기 접시 채워 그니 타로 웨이브 깨기 전에 가는 게 제일 좋아. cause 리퍼를 만나고 싶지 않을 거야. 넌 말하고 싶지 않은 마음처럼 감당 못해. 놀라서만의 열쇠 만들고 싶어. 그리고 내 기대고 싶지 않아. 뒤로 물러나. cause 미러 고생과 원하지 않아. 너 savage 마음속 보고 싶지 않아. 그리고 저 놈이 간에 인정받고 싶지 않아. 뭐 만약 그거 플레이하고 트라기로 했다면 think 행동 전에 rewind 안 돼. 원한 있는 남자, 케이스 가진 남자, 얼굴에 인텐디는 남자, 그리고 남자가 장소에 들어오면 let it be known, 나 hesitate 안 해. 우리 기다린 시간 come and blast, 저런 rocket blast, 때문에 모두 fire up, 그리고 내 검에 쓰러지면 내 back, 돼 hourglass, 모래 막히게 해, 우린 title fight, blow for blow, 그리고 넌 reap benefit, 내가 소화한 거, 그땐 그 가치에 대해 너 모르는 것 같아.
think it's enough. All right, cool video, whatever, decent music. It is what it is, right? I think it's there's definitely a lot of fans of the South Korean special operations. So, all right, so let's talk about the ROC, or the Republic of Korea's Special Missions Group, the 707th. So, if there's one unit on tonight's list that we're going to be cover that's under constant pressure, it's the 707th Special Missions Group. Because most special operation forces prepare for missions that might happen someday. The men and the women of the 707th prepare for missions that could begin tomorrow, obviously because of the pressure of North Korea, and because South Korea technically remains at war with North Korea. There's never been a peace treaty ending the Korean War. Only an armistice. It's technically only been an armistice, but that means every day they're training, every training exercise, every mission rehearsal is conducted with the understanding that a major conflict could erupt with North Korea with very little warning. And that reality shapes almost everything about this unit. The 707th was established in 1981 after the Munich Olympics terrorist attack highlighted that there was a need for a dedicated counterterrorism units all over the world. And South Korea was no different. South Korea wanted a force capable of responding to hijackings, hostage situations, terrorist attacks, and high-risk national security missions. So over the decades, the unit was expanded beyond pure counterterrorism, and today is considered South Korea's premier special missions force, or their special operations unit within the Korea's military structure. They're, obviously they specialize in domestic counterterrorism, special reconnaissance, direct action, and protection of critical national infrastructure, and prepping for operations deep inside North Korea if war was ever to break out with North Korea. So, what are the different things that are essentially known for? What are their strengths that they're known for? So they're constantly being trained, probably at a pretty high level, to probably most equivalent special operations countries or units within those particular countries, because there's always the threat of North Korea. And they believe in readiness. And so that's maintained extremely high operational readiness in comparison to a lot of other countries, even in that part of the world, because it's a part of day life. It's not really considered theoretical over there. They have excellent funding. South Korea spends heavily on defense, and in comparison to a lot of countries, their military is very well equipped, very well trained, and their special operations units are no different. So they definitely are and we talk about this on this list. There's a lot of countries in here have great operators, have great foundations, have great histories, but they suffer from funding. And one of the few outside of the United States that doesn't have that as big as a problem is the South Korean Special Missions Group. Integration, because they are, they have American military there in Korea. They deal with integration, and they're closely integrated with the American military and intelligence agencies and other allied militaries, but specifically the United States, which is definitely one of their strengths, because if there's ever something that's going to go down, whether it's Europe, any place in the world, you're going to probably be working with the United States. And because they work with the United States constantly, because we are in their country and have been a part of their sort of national mission, defense, and structure, that's definitely one of the advantages they have over other groups within the world's special operations. Professionalism. Everything publicly known about the unit suggests professionalism. But if you look at the culture of Korea, East Asia, like there's always been a high culture of discipline, and that definitely translates to their military, especially when it comes to their highest level of special operations. So what are the weaknesses, right? Obviously, they prepare for a potential operation against North Korea, but obviously that does not happen. So they actually have limited combat experience because they don't really do that much operations outside of their own country. They do, but it's not that as much as some other countries like the British or the Australians. So this is probably one of their biggest criticisms. So the 707th trains constantly, but hasn't really accumulated sustained combat experience of units that have spent years fighting insurgencies or developing their tactics overseas. Because training is invaluable, but combat experience is priceless, basically. So weakness number 2 of the Korean SMG is they're highly specialized, and most of their planning centers are defending of South Korea. And that's perfectly appropriate, but it means that they're not as globally deployed as a lot of the Western soft units. Their focus is against North Korea. Its focus is defending their homeland. So, and then probably one of their other weaknesses is, well, you know, it is what it is. It's so if I had to compare the 707th to Western units, I'd say they'd probably be closest to the role to like the France's GIGN, because they are a military unit. They do counterterrorism. They do a number of different things, but they are very almost domestically focused, right? Kind of like similar to how you would see a lot of like police, like the FBI, HRT, and things like that. I think eventually Korea will expand its role, kind of just similar how Japan is starting to as well. But that is definitely one of their biggest weaknesses, is the fact that they're so singular focused on the defense of South Korea and potential war against North Korea that they have all this training, but they have limited combat experience. So what do you guys think? Where would you guys think that the South Korean Special Missions Group would go into this ranking system that we have talked about numerous times? Let's go ahead and put up a poll while I do this. And once we do the poll, then we'll go on to our next special operations unit, which will be in Africa. All right, let me see if I can remember how to do this. New poll. Oops. And just so you guys know, I will actually be expanding the rating system for this, because to include a lot more of the world special operations units, we're going to have to actually give people a lower ranking than C+. All right, it's up. So go ahead and type in 1 for S tier, 2 for A tier, 3 for B tier, or 4 for C tier. And if you want to type specifically whether it's a plus or a minus for that, throw that in the comments. All right. So, and then also, what unit would you guys probably closely associate them with? All right. So now we're moving on, boys. We are going to move on to, so our next unit couldn't be more different. Okay. Instead of modern cities, think vast African bush. Instead of prepping for a possible future conflict, think decades of real combat in some of the harshest terrain on Earth. I feel like my camera is still doing weird shit as far as the focus. It's not done this before. Anyways, so let's head all the way down to South Africa and meet one of the most respected reconnaissance forces created in Africa, the South African Recce's. All right, so this is a little bit of a longer video. But we're going to...
What is the South African Special Forces? The South African Special Forces Brigade, popularly known as Recce's, is the only Special Forces unit of the South African National Defence Force, SANDF. It was established on the 1st of October 1972 at Oudtshoorn, South Africa. A few years later, the headquarters was moved to Durban, South Africa. The brigade was the first South African Special Forces unit. The old South African Defence Force, SADF, was primarily a highly specialized unit born in the midst of a growing fire of communist insurgencies around the continent. The South African Special Forces played a significant role in the country's 30-year-long border war in Namibia and Angola. South African Special Forces now consists of Special Forces headquarters in Pretoria, 4 Special Forces Regiment in Langebaan, 5 Special Forces Regiment, Phalaborwa, and the Special Forces School in Murray Hill. 4 Special Forces Regiments specialize in maritime-related activities, whereas 5 Special Forces Regiment specializes more in overland techniques, especially long-range infiltration. The brigade is directly under the command of the Joint Operations Division of SANDF, and unlike other similar forces worldwide, is not a part of the South African Army. Members of the South African Special Forces are expanded into 2 additional groups. Although they are also termed regiments, they consist only of small numbers of operators who are secretive, seldom photographed, and expertly trained. The Recce's are one of the lesser-known or understood groups of soldiers in the world today, because their operations and formations have changed over the years. Operation.
All right, so we don't really need to go into that just yet, but we are going to. You know what? Let's do this. What is that badge? I forget. Interesting. Okay. I don't think I'd actually looked up their badge before. So let's talk about the South African Recce's. Oh, you know what? Let's go into. Let's talk about some of these comments real quick. Let's see here. This was back in when we were talking about mixed martial arts. Strickland proved that a couple times. Yeah, and then this goes into this next comment from Jean-Pierre. Let's be honest. Are you going to bring a gi to a counterterrorism operation? Yes, obviously the skill that you need most is how to shoot. But I will be honest. I don't think we train hand to hand enough in American special operations. I think it is something that is glassed over, and we just think that because we're gunfighters that's all we need. And anybody who's actually been in these rooms, these close quarters battles, is called close quarter for a lot of times. You actually be surprised when some sort of level of combat that actually happens that doesn't involve the actual shooting portion, whether it's barrel stuffing people or, wrestling people to the ground. It definitely happens. And I definitely think that, especially at the tier 2 level, I think we are very underprepared for what could happen if shit goes down to the ground. My personal opinion. Can you explain the necessity of combat experience over training a little bit more in depth? I keep hearing the term train how you fight, but is combat more of how you know how to react? It's a good question. All right. So every time you have to think about this, right? So every time someone is training, most countries train for whatever the last conflict they fought was, right? And because of that, and this has been something we've been trying to correct within the American military, is that, for example, when we went into Desert Storm, we were training to fight the Vietnam War, right? And then when we were going into essentially the global war on terror in 2001 and 2003, we were training how to fight Desert Storm. So a lot of countries are very similar. They're training to fight whatever their last war was. Why combat experience is so important is, I'll give you one of the biggest examples. So when we started the global war on terror, all direct action, all CQB, even at the tier 1 level, was loud and fast. Is that we would come in, we would drop flashbangs, grenades, everything, and we hit the rooms. What we learned is our enemies knew this. So what did they start doing? They started barricading themselves behind sandbags and putting light machine guns, and we'd come through doors and they basically prepared for these type of encounters, and we started losing people. And then we were like, well, hey, why do we have to go in loud and fast when we can go in quiet and slow? And they started to adapt on the fly. But you don't learn these things, how to adapt and how to change your tactics, if you're not doing combat experience. Because if you're just training, your training is based off of combat experience, and your combat experience is whatever the last time you had combat experience. So if you haven't had combat experience since your last war, you're training probably outdated techniques. And this has happened to the American military. This happens to everybody in the world. And luckily in the American system, especially with the leeway that a lot of the tier 1 units are getting, and even probably even units like the special activities, the SAC and the CIA, they have a lot of leeway to constantly update their tactics on the fly and not have to wait until a next war happens. And they have to, because that's usually what happens, is there has to be another war for us to fundamentally change our tactics within a military. And this happens for almost every military in the world. I think the American guidance makes up for the lack of combat experience for the South Korean SS7, since they were heavily integrated with the American military. I would put them at an A or A+. That's definitely a factor, right? Definitely having that American guidance definitely helps, but that's not, it's kind of like, it only gets you about halfway there, right? They, as their own organization, cannot be held to really stand on their own 2 feet one day. They can't have their hands held. And in order for them to really take it to that next level, like they really do, they need their own combat experience. And it's definitely what's limiting them in this particular category, because they have almost everything else. They've got the money, they got the technology, they've got the discipline within their culture to make amazing operators, right? But they're just kind of lacking combat experience. And definitely the Americans being there definitely helps. So they're definitely probably going to do well on this list as compared to some other countries in similar situations. So you would associate them with the SAS. Well, a lot of tier 1 units are going to be associated with SAS, but then how do they fall as far as their intelligence? What's the level of support? How much intelligence do they have? Because what's the point of a direct action force if you don't have intelligence that tells you what the right door to hit is, right? You can have the greatest shooters in the world, but if you don't have intelligence people to tell you which door and which people to shoot, you're not that effective, right? And then what's the money behind that? Because that drives support. Yeah. So South African Special Forces Brigade was good up until the late 90s when apartheid ended. The Rhodesian and British links is what made them so good at long range. And I would actually agree with this, and because one of probably the greatest military forces really in Africa was the Rhodesian Bush Wars and what Rhodesia had going on. And when that kind of left, a lot of that influence left the continent of Africa. So I have to say, if any continent that is lacking, that is in last place as far as development of special operations, it's basically Africa, just as a whole, right? There's obviously some exceptions, but just as a whole, they're lacking. They're the farthest behind in a lot of different things military wise, but special operations is definitely one of those. All right, so let's get into more about the recce's, the South African recce's. And so if you've probably spent any time studying special operations, you'll understand the recce's. You probably heard that name, whether it's in Delta, RRC, if you're guessing what it means is reconnaissance, you would be absolutely correct. Because among professional warriors, the term recce actually carries weight. These weren't soldiers built for media attention or flashy recruitment videos. They're built for one purpose, and that's going deep behind enemy lines, operating with little support. So the recce's take their origins back to 1972 during South Africa's border war. At this time, South Africa faced insurgencies from conventional military threats across South Africa, or Southern Africa, not obviously they are South Africa, but across Southern Africa, particularly Namibia and Angola. So the South African military needed operators capable of conducting missions for beyond conventional front lines. The answer was the reconnaissance commandos, which would eventually become simply known as the Reckies. And their operators included long-range reconnaissance, sabotage, intelligence, unconventional warfare, and a lot of support to these covert operations that they had going on. And even today, their legacy remains central to their Special Forces Brigade, or the South African Special Forces Brigade. So obviously they specialize in long-range reconnaissance. They do a lot of different things, obviously, like similar organizations, that just because their main focus is reconnaissance doesn't mean that's all they can do. Like just like RRC does, reconnaissance, they also do direct action. They also do intelligence operations, things like this. So, there's a lot of things that you probably have heard about the Recce selection. They have a pretty decent selection. There has historically been one of the toughest military courses, in the world, especially for that part of the world. But their training has the terrain in South Africa in that area obviously is kind of dynamic, kind of very similar to the Australian SASR, right? That's also a predominantly Recce organization. So where the Recce separate themselves from a lot of many other special operations units is that they actually have real world combat experience, kind of like opposite to the South Korean 707th SMG. They have extensive real world experience, and during the border war, they conducted numerous reconnaissance missions, raids, and covert operations. Their operators learned lessons that simply can't be replicated on a training range. In combat develops judgment. It triggers adaptation, adaptability, confidence under pressure, and that experience became a part of that unit's international culture. Modern South African Special Forces remain well equipped by regional standards, but Africa is by far, as far as a continent, special operations, they're definitely the farthest behind in training methodology and especially equipment, right? So if you've seen pictures of what those South African Recce's, obviously there's a lot of really good experience from the border wars, but even that's been a while, right? So I want to take that, but it's like you have an asterisk as far as their combat experience. Yes, they have combat experience, but it's been a hot second since they've actually, really, it's been a while. So a lot of the strengths that when you talk about the South African Recce's is their tradecraft. They're definitely good at moving around, being unseen. They definitely deal with tracking and counter tracking. They're really good in their survival techniques and really good at observation. They're actually a very good reconnaissance unit. Obviously they've got combat experience, but it has been a hot second. Strength number 3 is their ability to adapt. So they have the environments that they've been operating in have been pretty demanding. The bush, the mountains, the desert, the remote wilderness, that kind of portion of Africa kind of has a full gambit of different types of environments. And another thing they're kind of also well known for is their small unit leadership. They've been really good at developing leadership within these really small units, and just overall, just really good reconnaissance expertise. So their weakness is that they have really bad budget constraints. So modern South African faces a lot of economic challenges going on right now, and their defensing is more limited than it once was. So they have less money than they did prior. So they have definitely a much smaller strategic support compared to a lot of other special operations throughout the world. And they have a lot of institutional challenges. The modern brigade doesn't operate under the same strategic circumstances as it did during the border war, right? For a lot of different reasons. Their operational tempo is different. Their mission priorities have changed, and maintaining elite standards across decades since then is not easy, especially with their budget constraints. So I honestly think that this is one of those situations where the recce's, the South African recce's, have deteriorated over time. So back probably during the Bush War, they probably would have rated, or no, the Bush War, the wars would have rated pretty high on this list in relatively comparison, but they have definitely probably dropped if this list would have been created in the 90s. So what do you guys think as far as where the South African, let's throw up a poll for this one. All right, so this one, you guys need to don't put a what do you call it? Don't put a plus or minus when you type in the number, because it doesn't register on the poll. Either type 1, 2, 3, or 4 to whatever, just general what tier, because I'm not going to make like 8 of these, if that makes sense. All right, so here's the South African recce tier. Honestly, you know what? Let's add. Never mind, it's fine. Let's get what you guys think, and then I'm going to go into the comments. Do you think the U.S. performed better in war with drones than people think? Seems like a common negative sentiment is that we aren't good and rely on air support too much. Well, I actually think that right now, if you look at what's going on with U.S. development, we are definitely seeing what's going on in Ukraine, and we are adapting. Like, we are going full into drones and counter drone technology. So we currently, obviously, I don't think that there's such a thing to rely on air support too much. I think what it is incorporating the new dynamic to the battlefield, which is now drones, because drones right now do not have the technology, right, to stop like fast moving aircraft. So until that does, I don't think it's going to weaken how much air support we use. But we are in the process of developing our own drone systems and anti-drone systems, because we have seen the effectiveness of how Ukraine is fighting Russia, and Russia is obviously using drones as well. And we are anticipating that in our next major battlefield, or if not sooner rather than later. So we are adapting. One thing that we do very, very well, and the greatest part about the United States' funding system, is that we do adapt pretty quickly. Especially in the last like 10 or 15 years, we've done really well at adapting. So most people are voting C tier. I would definitely agree. I think the South African recce's are going to probably, when they do appear on this list, whether it's part 2 or part 3, they're probably going to be pretty low on this list. And I don't know. Well, as I go through this and I kind of compile for part 2 and part 3, we might even create a D tier. All right, it's nothing bad, right? Obviously, you're still getting compared to the rest of the world's special operations. Rhodesians would put blackface on the point man of their patrols. I heard that would not surprise me, to be honest. First line, have I ever been able to tune? I thought your ranking on Australia to SF is very analytical and touched on really solid points when it comes to funding. Curious why you put SASR over 2 Commando. So that's a really, Josh, that's a really good question. And that was like I almost put SASR over the 2, or on the same level as the 2 Commando. It was very, very close, right? So it was kind of like, it kind of goes back to, because the Australian Commando, right? The one thing that a lot of people don't know is the Australians don't have the typical tier 1, tier 2 relationship like the British have. the Americans have, like even the Canadians, like how the JTF2 relates with their CSOR. The two commandos have only grown, and they're closing in on the gap between the Australian SAS. So I actually think that if this list was in another 10 years, I would probably, you'll see the Australian commandos at the same level because they actually share the counterterrorism role with the Australian SAS. And one difference between the British SAS and the Australian SAS, man, a lot of people don't know, is their actually main role, their original primary role is actually not counterterrorism. It's actually reconnaissance. Like they're probably a lot of ways closer to the RRC. And obviously they have roles like where they also fill like Delta and stuff like that. But then the second commandos also do that, right? Because basically SASR are on the west, the commandos are on the east, and that's kind of how it works. So it's a really good question. Where I made a final decision just to put them just right below it, but they are very, very close. The commandos are very close. And probably in a certain amount of time, if I was to redo this list in like 5 to 10 years, they will probably be on the same level as the Australian SASR. I hope that answered your question, brother, and I appreciate you turning in. I've heard some former SF guys say we've been pretty heavily involved behind the scenes in Ukraine. We're I'll be honest, we're pretty involved in every conflict that's going on around the world, but definitely the research and development side of things, we are watching what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. As far as like our future development of our capabilities and whether that's our drone program, but also our counter drone program, that's definitely being watched and being check the last video from Grand Thumb and the company Power Up and their drones demo developed and tested in Ukraine, supplying them. They noted they are already supplying tier 1 US soft interest rate. Yes. So think about this, right? So when I was at the tier 1 level and I was like doing stuff with Delta and SEAL Team 6, we were having these conversations about drones as early as 2012 and 2013. So this is not something that was a surprise. The only thing that surprised us was how much a country like Ukraine would rely on drones. And they actually end up becoming more effective. We knew that eventually, like we theorized in 2012, what we thought warfare was going to be like if we got into another conflict of Russia, it was going to be special operations on special operations, like basically like Delta versus Spetsnaz, but we would never see each other. We would just be attacking each other with drones. That's not exactly what happened, but in a way it kind of has, right? So instead, what we have right now currently is we have trench warfare combined with drones, right? I don't think anybody really predicted that particular how it worked out, but it definitely confirmed drones being a part of the future, and then that we definitely underestimated how quickly drone technology would expand and how important it has become as far as the modern battlefield goes. So I don't know what that means. The war crime expose on SAS was crazy. The one guy jumps on a bunker and just jumps in, and then they throw a thermal and pure aggression. Yeah. And there's a lot of videos on this. Australia's going through this. The British are going through this. A lot of European countries, top special operations, are being attacked by their own governments. And it's definitely a factor in how effective your unit is when your own country is coming after you. So if you don't think that that's an issue, you've never been inside one of the units, because trust me, when you feel like your government's against you, it definitely affects your overall effectiveness. Yeah, it's like the World War modern. Yes, absolutely. So all right, so let's do, all right, shall we go back to Asia and hit up, let's see, where did I have this one? Allegedly, one of the guys Spartan kicked a dude off a cliff, allegedly. Well, bro, you know, I feel like everybody needs to learn how to Spartan kick somebody. I feel like that's, if you're not Spartan kicking people, like, what are we even doing, right? So, okay. let's go on to, let me set up this next section real quick. Yes. All right. What country do you think we're going to cover next in Asia? While I'm playing that, I'm going to play. Oh, I did. Let me see if I can find this real quick. So I found this dude who does. I'm just going to play this real quick. I found this dude who he's an Asian YouTuber who covers a lot of like the militaries in that part of the world. And so I thought I would play that real quick while I set up this next section.
In this video, I will be covering the different special forces units of the Republic of Korea. Under the Republic of Korea Army is the Army Special Warfare Command. Based in Incheon, it comprises 6 Special Forces brigades and 1 overseas deployment group.
Not the most exciting
As
voice,
compared to a typical brigade,
but
the ROK Special Forces Brigade is significantly smaller in size, comprising only about 600 personnel. The first Special Forces Brigade was established in 1958.
all right. I just thought that was interesting that you've got like some of these like Asian YouTubers who are doing the same thing that a lot of the Americans are over here. And, you know, there's a lot of pride over there in that part of the world as well. All right. So now we're going to Japan. We're going to cover the 7th. I'm sorry. Whoops. I messed it up. We're going to cover the Japanese Special Forces Unit. And it is known as the SFG, or the Special Forces Group. So here we go. And this one is covered by our boy, Special Forces TV. Let's get it in.
Most people don't even know Japan has special forces, but hidden in the shadows of Mount Fuji is a unit trained to take on North Korea, insurgents, and even invasions. They're called the SFGP, and they don't play games. Japan's Special Forces Group, SFGP, was formed in 2004, and they've been secretive from day one. Why? Because their enemies aren't theoretical. With North Korea just across the water and China rising, Japan needed a real deterrent. The SFGP are trained by the US Green Berets and Delta Force. They study urban warfare, direct action raids, rescue, and operate in full blackout secrecy. Their training includes halo jumps, CQB, and long-range recon. And unlike Japan's pacifist image, these operators are ready to kill. You won't see them in parades, you won't hear about their missions, and most Japanese citizens have no idea they exist, which is exactly how they like it. If war ever comes to Japan's shores, the SFGP won't be the first to speak, they'll be the first to strike.
Okay.
Time to intercept. Free mics.
All right. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I already want to jump.
Most people don't even.
All right. So let's get into what do you think? What is Japan SFG badge is? Okay. So someone already answered this question, and I think this is a good question to ask. So for anybody who doesn't necessarily know the history about Japan, after World War II, as a part of their armistice or the surrender agreement, is that Japan was not allowed to have a defense. They were only allowed to have a defense force, which has limited to their size of their military that they could have and have a capability, which technically they weren't allowed to have a military because they were using terminology that a defense force is different than a military, right? So, but that was supposed to have a time limit on it. It is okay. So Japan effectively has, I'm looking this up real quick because I wanted to get an answer. So it says, when can Japan have a military again? Right. And actually, let's throw this over here and let's read this together. All right. So technically, Japan doesn't have official military. Article 9 of the post-war Constitution But anyone who's seen the Japanese Self-Defense Force, the JDSDF, in action knows that not the full story. While Japan insists it doesn't have a military, the JSDF looks and operates like it's funded one. So why doesn't Japan have a military? Obviously, we're talking about Article 9. That changed in 1954 when the JDSF was established. The logic, Japan needed some form of defense. Also, we needed an ally and some sort of military support when dealing with China and other possible threats, also Russia and everything like that. If they at least had some sort of self-defense force, we had some sort of military aid in that particular area, and not just South Korea. So, so this one was... So how could Japan get a military again? There's two ways. They amend Article 9, which would require a 2/3 majority in both houses of the national, basically Japan's legislature and their national referendum. While discussions on revisiting Article 9 have been ongoing for decades, public opinion remains divided. Many Japanese support the pacifist clause, worried that a full military could drag Japanese into an unnecessary conflict, which is a very similar thinking of how Germany almost feels, but so it's a very interesting thing. So, but what they are allowed to do is the Japanese have definitely created a pretty impressive special operations unit. So now let's get into that. So now we're talking about, as I said, we're talking about Japan's SFG, which is their special forces group. It is so Japan's Special Group has built its reputation through decades of public combat operations. So anybody who follows what goes on and whenever Japan does particular operations, a lot of it's very public. But one of the things that, just like similar to South Korea, like what are the Japanese known for? Whether it's samurai, bushido, almost anything in their culture, it's about professionalism, discipline, passion, and if you combine that with people who want to have that like tier 1 special operations, you can only imagine that creates an extraordinary training culture within that particular unit. And Japan actually has one of the most technologically advanced militaries in all of Asia. The question is, can exceptional preparation make up for limited combat experience? Very similar to some of the issues that the South Korean SMG has. But just a quick history, right? So Japan's Special Forces Group was officially established in 2004 under the Japan's Ground Self-Defense Force. Following this, and this was all following the September 11th attacks and the growing security concerns in East Asia. And Japan recognized that it needed a dedicated military special operations capability. So the SFG was modeled in part on the U.S. Special Forces, or the Green Berets. Thus, why it's called the Special Forces Group, which is what Special Forces units are called, Special Forces Groups. So that makes sense. And they benefited from an extensive cooperation with America and allied special operations units. We have military in Okinawa, and a lot of the same benefits that Japan has they're very similar and mirrored to what South Korea has. Although relatively young, even in compared to South Korean's special operations, or even then more so compared to the SAS and some of the other world special operations units, they have steadily evolved into Japan's premier special operations unit. So they are like a lot of highest level special operations. They deal with counterterrorism, direct action. They're also doing their special reconnaissance. So you can imagine, because it's not a full military, it's a self-defense force. They're not going to have this huge, extensive special operations that do many different jobs. They're going to have one that has kind of a Swiss Army knife. They're going to do a lot of different things. And they're modeled after Green Berets, which is essentially the Swiss Army knife of our special operations units. So their selection is very competitive. It's very, they kind of model it off of the United States Special Forces, the SFAS. They do a lot of different training. So their training is incredibly comprehensive. Close quarter battles, every type of fast roping operations, everything that you could kind of think of in recce, counterterrorism, direct action. So as far as the international cooperation, because there is a unit of Green Berets in Japan, right? It's what, 1st Battalion? It's 1st Battalion, 1st Group. My 1st Group. Yeah. So they're also in Okinawa, Japan. So, oh, you know what? No, we already watched that. Okay. So, and because of that, and because obviously they have a full battalion of Green Berets in Japan, and that's one of the reasons why the Japan, when they created special operations, why it's modeled after the Green Berets. And so obviously they also have a lot of time training with special forces, you know, and obviously the Navy SEALs come there as well. They've trained with the Navy SEAls. The Australian SASR and the 2nd Commandos are close nearby because they're in the same region of the world. They've trained with them. So they are definitely one of, very similar to the South Koreans, they have a lot of interoperability with other world special operations. They have a lot of experience in it. And these partnerships have helped to expose the Japanese special operations operators to different operational methods and help ensure interoperability across multiple different coalitions, like not just the United States. As I said, you know, countries like Australia and the British. So because Japan is an economic powerhouse and they definitely have a lot of technology, they're one of those technological militaries, funding is not as big of an issue. They are exceptionally well equipped. They don't spend as much money as South Korea does, but they are definitely pound for pound, definitely spending more money than, let's just say, the South African Recce's are getting. So they have probably some of the best equipment, you know, thermal imaging, night vision, modern assault rifles. And so probably if anybody was to think about what the strengths be of a Japanese special operations, and honestly, if you think of Japanese culture, you would obviously think of outstanding discipline, because Japanese military culture is emphasized on professionalism because it's a part of their culture of people not even in the military. So that makes sense. And when you have that, you also are going to get excellent training, which is also one of their biggest strengths, because their quality of training is considered essentially world class. Their operators spend enormous amounts of time refining their fundamentals. And that builds confidence and competence, which is a big deal. Technology is Japan. You know, we always think of Japan as like, you think of, you know, Japanese anime, mecha, robots, like technology. They've always been like, they, you know, before we ever caught up in as far as like gaming and stuff like that, just like a lot of the computer types of the world, everything like that, that part of the world has always exceeded, and Japan is no different. And obviously they have a strong alliance network, not just with us, the British, the Australians, everybody like that. And they have a very professional military culture, but they also comes from the fact that they already have a very professional culture. And no surprise. All right. So let's talk about the Japanese Special Forces group weaknesses, right? Limited combat experience. Why? Because they don't have a real military. They have a self-defense force. And that's, so they have suffered from a lot of the same issues that South Korea does, because they're only really worried about defense and not really going overseas and doing external operations. So that definitely affects them, because what they're trading on is really just based off of the combat experience that we give them. They have constitutional constraints because of Article 9 and their fact that they're not allowed to have an official military. So for decades, Japan's post-World War II constitution and defense policies placed significant limits on their overseas military operations. And so their special operations have very limited overseas operations, and that's definitely a downside to it. And so, and that's probably the main two things, right? Is they're in very similar. I feel like these are the two biggest weaknesses of South Korea as well. And so you can see that there's a lot of similarities there. So let's throw this in here, right? Let's go to our next poll. All right. Let's remember if I know how to type. That's not it. All right. Remember, don't put any plus or minuses. Just type 1, 2, 3, or 4. All right. Here's the poll for war. The Japon or the Japanese. What do you guys think? Where do you think Japan is going? My guess is they're going above the Reckies. That would be my guess. C tier, just dropping it already, man. A bunch of Japanese haters out there, apparently. All right. Let's go into... All right. So, as you guys are doing that, which shall we go back to the lovely continent of Africa? And if we're going back to Africa, which one do you think we're going to cover next? We got to vote for Morocco. Anybody think anything else as far as what's going on in Africa? Nigerian soft, I think they're the most active. You're probably right. Outside of, yeah, I can't imagine anybody getting more most recent combat experience than the Nigerian soft, right? But question is how effective they are. All right. So the next one we are going to go into is the... Actually, let me see if I pulled this one up already. Ooh, apparently I did not. Okay. If you guessed... Oh, you know what? I tried to find a video on this now that I remember, because I tried to get all these videos ready prior. Is Morocco. We are going to cover the Morocco Special Operations Forces. All right. The only video that I could find that even did any is a video from about the Special Operations Command Africa. So we're just going to watch this just because I feel like I try to find one video per Special Operations unit, but this is on Morocco.
Well, what we're doing out here in Morocco is we're doing some combined training with the Moroccan Armed Forces. We have 4 units with us right now.
So the context of this video, this is the 19th Special Forces Group, who is essentially, they're doing a joint operation with Moroccan Special Operations with the 19th Special Forces Group, the Green Berets. National Guard Green Berets, which in my personal opinion are the best type of Green Berets.
It's their Air Force Special Operations Unit. We have the Gendarmerie Royale HRT unit and 2 units from the Special Operations companies from the 1st and 2nd BIP.
Look at those graphics. Those are impressive. PowerPoint Rangers. That's what these guys are.
To strengthen and continue building that relationship with the Moroccan Armed Forces that we've had for so long. Ultimately, at the end of this, we hope that they get a little bit better and we get a little bit better as well.
Specific skills that we've worked on during this training have been TCCC medical training. We've spent a week with marksmanship training, starting with the basics and working up through combat marksmanship, as well as CQB, close quarters battle, small unit tactics, urban operations, and vehicle interdictions as well. In the near future, we're looking forward to more engagements with other Special Forces teams, as well as the SVAB, as Morocco is really seen as a pillar of security here within the African continent.
All right. Nothing. All. If you guys saw, let's go back to. You can kind of guess what their budget is based off of the fact that we're in. How old is this video? 1 year old, and this is how their special operations are. This is their high-end equipment for the Moroccan special operations. Is stuff we don't even really give our own regular army anymore. Can you wear the Ranger scroll without being in the unit? When you're there, yes. If you're Ranger qualified, you can have the Ranger tab, but in order for you to have the Ranger scroll, you either have to be in the unit or it could be a combat patch, and then you've obviously had to serve is the combat. It was probably a combat patch. I think I know what you're talking about.
We're looking forward to more engagements with other special forces.
Yeah, if it's on the right arm, it's a combat patch, which means he served in combat with the Ranger Regiment, which would have been, I can't exactly what it says. Let me zoom in. I think it's second.
This team
Ranger.
well.
So yeah, if it's on the right side, it's a combat patch, which means there's a lot of Green Berets who used to be Rangers, and so it makes sense that especially somebody who's in the National Guard Green Berets was at one point a Ranger, because that used to be a pretty progression, which was people would go Rangers and then they'd go Green Berets, but it's probably more they go Rangers and then they go Delta Force nowadays. All right, so let's cover the Moroccan Special Operations Force. So this is probably, I think, as far as like poverty goes in special operations, I think Morocco and the South African recce's are definitely probably the lowest on this list that we've seen so far, right? So Morocco has quietly been building trying to build one of Africa's most capable special operations, right? They're not flashy. They don't receive much media attention, but they are trying to build up their special operations forces, right? So Morocco has maintained specialized military units for decades, but over the last 20 years, the country made significant investment in trying to modernize its special operations capabilities. Because of the rise of terrorism in North Africa, the instability in the Sahel region, and ongoing regional security concerns have pushed Morocco to expand both its military capabilities and its partnerships with Western nations. So today, Moroccan special operations personnel regularly participate in multinational exercises and are considered one of the more professional, capable forces. That is a relative term, all right? That is of African nations. Like I said, they are the continent that's the farthest behind. So among African nations, they're definitely one of the ones trying to push their special operations to the next level. And it is what it is. If they're trying to push it harder, awesome. You got to start somewhere. So we're not shitting on them, right? You're just calling it how it is, right? GJST is the best Moroccan soft, and you're not covering them. Watch the GJST. Look, there are hundreds. Almost every country has more than one special operations unit, right? And it is possible that a lot of countries are going to have more than one special operations eventually. By the time we end with part 2 and part 3, it's possible that you're going to have one or two of every country on this list. We shall see. But I can't cover every single one. So when I come across one, I choose for these particular lives which one I'm going to cover. And today we are covering the Moroccan Special Operations Forces, right? So if that's not on the list, okay. Apparently, okay. So we just did a test. Give me 1 second, boys. Let me fix something. All right. Give me 1 second. We're still here. So we were trying, look, we was trying to see how long the battery was going to last on a strict doing 4K. And apparently we're right about an hour and a half on a full battery, or just probably a little bit over. So I just plugged it back in. Give me a few minutes and we will come back up and we'll see if the charger effects can get the camera to go. Okay. So that's good. All right. So we are going to do something. Did you auto-save? No, I have not auto-saved yet. All right. So for a number of different reasons, not just because I was not paying attention to the battery, we're actually going to cut it short here. And I'm actually going to pick up with Morocco on the next live. So you guys will already know that we'll start with Morocco next, and then we're going to hit a couple other ones on the next episode. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I hope you guys have the rest of your week, and I will talk to you guys later this week.